Assuming you already know how your general Final Fantasy game works, this is Final Fantasy V. Each Final Fantasy does something new to keep the series from being redundant, whether it be 4's active time battles, 6's Esper, 7's Materia, or 8's Junctioning. Instead of something new, however, 5 reuses 3's job system and puts it into a world with active time battles, which isn't really a bad thing as one might think. This game was the first of Square's to allow the player to visually anticipate the next turn via an active time bar called an ATB, which was integrated into nearly every one of Square's RPGs afterwards. Your characters included Bart, Selena, Galuf, and Ferris, the combination of which fits the bill for a balanced party in terms of character stats, but it's up to you to choose the jobs most suited for these characters, and mix and match earned abilities to make destructive combinations. Each time you win a battle, you earn ability points, which is basically experience for your job. Each level, your character usually either learns something new for that job or earns an ability from the job to carry over to use it in another job. For instance, the monk is good with his hands. A few level ups and you can make it so that, say, a red mage requires no weapon to defend himself when low on MP as opposed to using a weak staff or something. Or you could even carry over the warrior's two-handed skill to the Spellblade class to wield a magically imbued sword with 2 hands for incredible destructive capabilities. There were 21 jobs to choose from originally. Such a number means that part of the interest is in the jobs themselves, ranging from the classic warrior, monk, red, white, and black mages, to more interesting ones such as beast tamer, chemist, mime, samurai, dancer, and time mage. The player could completely ignore or embrace any of the jobs he wants to, making this quite possibly the least linear of the entire series. The possibilities are immense. Revealing any of the plot would lead to spoilers, so I won't mention anything other than the story mostly revolves around the character Galuf and his lost memories. This Final Fantasy was unfortunately lost in time, and is one of those lesser played because of this. There were several attempts to bring it to the Western Hemisphere, but most of them failed. It was to be America's Final Fantasy III in 1993, but it was deemed too complex for the average gamer. Square tried once again in 1995 to release it as Final Fantasy Extreme, but it was dropped for unknown reasons. After a failed attempt to put it on Microsoft-based PCs in 1997, the fans took matters into their own hands and made Final Fantasy V the first-cited fan-translated RPG. Finally, in 1999, Final Fantasy Anthology was released for the PlayStation, which packaged 5 and 6 together. Another easier, less English version was also released for the GBA, which included new dungeons and extra rigged jobs.
What began as a final work of Hinoboru Sakaguchi for a failing company soon became the salvation of Squaresoft from ruin, a revolution in RPG games and the first game from the best-known RPG series in the world. I'm talking of Final Fantasy I. This is the game from the series with most versions and remakes, the PSP version being the most complete of all. And even though it was released over 20 years ago, Final Fantasy I is still very much played among fans. Why is that? Because Final Fantasy I isn't only the RPG that started it all, but is also a good game and contains the main gaming fundamentals of the series. The game is about the 4 light warriors, who must defeat the 4 elemental fiends in order to restore the light of the orbs, and thus save the world from chaos. So with that task, our heroes travel through a huge fantastic world as the epic story develops. The game is fun, simple and addictive, and in some of the recent versions you have new features like full motion videos or bonus dungeons. Worthy of mention is the fact that some of Final Fantasy I's musical tracks became mainstays of the entire series.
Final Fantasy III from Square Enix was the last Final Fantasy on the 8-bit NES system. It packed quite a punch for it to be on the console. Final Fantasy was then later re-released on the Nintendo DS and was unleashed upon the Western market. The DS version was slightly different, but it was still the same game. This was the second game to use the row system, and it was the first Final Fantasy to incorporate the job system. A total of 22 job classes are obtainable throughout the game. If you thought Bahamut made his debut in any other games, you were wrong. I first played this game way back in '97 when my brother came home and had it on a floppy disk. I played the hell out of that game. I only got as far as Bahamut's Nest. After a patch was released, I then knew what I was doing. DS or NES, it's really the user's choice. If you can get your hands on the original, I'd definitely get it to play on those high-definition screens. It really doesn't play that bad at all.
Final Fantasy XII. A refreshing change for Square fans everywhere. Players were sucked into the majestic world of Iblis. One thing that separates Final Fantasy XII from the rest was its absolutely magnificent graphics. The story follows a youth named Vaughn, who was the brother of a slightly older soldier who was killed in the prologue during a great battle against Arcadia. The story sets off at an excellent pace, with the player taking control of Vaughn's brother from the very start, and fighting his way through a large war-torn battlefield. The combat system has been totally remade, with battle transitions taken out and just sticking to running and attacking in real time. The story gets a bit too political and confusing, but there's certainly never a moment where nothing is going on. Final Fantasy XII is definitely a must-buy if you like the series. Just a variety of characters and their personalities, and a huge world to explore that seems to have no boundaries. Overall, I loved Final Fantasy XII. Square made no mistake with this one. It kept everything that was great about Final Fantasy and made it better.
Final Fantasy IV is one of the first Super Nintendo games I owned, and the very first RPG I ever played. When I got it, I didn't understand what MP was, so I would blow it all and wouldn't be able to cast any spells, and I didn't know you had to level up, so I ended up running for most of the battles and getting murdered by the boss. I didn't figure out until later how an RPG worked. You play as Cecil, a dark knight, until you eventually find the light and become a paladin. You are joined by Kain, a dragoon, Rosa, a white mage, Radia, a summoner, and Edge, a ninja. You're on a quest to defeat the evil wizard Golbez, who is trying to gather crystals and destroy the world. He's one of the original badass villains. It looks like a demonic suit of armor, and creepy organ music plays every time he enters. This is one of the first games I remember in which playable characters die. The old mage Tellus sacrifices himself by casting Meteor, and it doesn't even scratch Golbez. This is one of the saddest moments in video games.